Have a lot more of those shots in the Hardball Sideshow tonight. But first, Vice President Cheney and that decision to go to war in Iraq. David Corn is the Washington Bureau Chief for Mother Jones, and former Assistant Secretary of Defense Frank Gaffney is the President of the Center for Security Policy. Let's take a look again at the question put by Carl, the ABC correspondent, Jonathan Karl, to Vice President Cheney, and his rather remarkable answer.
You probably saw Karl Rove last week said that if the intelligence had been correct, we probably would not have gone to war.
I disagree with that.
Well, what do we make of that? Frank Gaffney, does that surprise you? I know you're a hawk. You're on the show often. We like you on the show. We think a lot of your thinking. Is that surprising to you that we didn't need to believe that there were weapons of mass destruction stockpiled in Iraq as a cause for war? We didn't need to believe that. We had other reasons to go to war, and they were justified.
You know, Chris, the only thing I'm really surprised at is that you're surprised at that answer. The truth of the matter is we went through, in the run-up to the war, a variety of different and compelling reasons why Saddam Hussein had to be put out of business, one of which was we believed he had the capability to marry up terrorism, which he actively supported, with weaponry of mass destruction, which he had. And to the extent that we knew, or we thought we knew, exactly where he had stockpiles of the stuff was, I think, secondary to the danger, in particular in the aftermath of 9/11, where we had seen thousands of Americans killed by terrorists using a kind of weapon of mass destruction. This was the kind of thing that I think the President had an obligation to put out of business. And let me just add one point. The Iraq Survey Group, you mentioned the inspections that were done. The inspections that were done after we liberated the place found not only those feedstocks that Dick Cheney talked about, but found plans to put the product, after sanctions were lifted, which was imminent, in perfume sprayers and aerosol cans for shipment to the United States and Europe. A clear act of terrorism that would have had catastrophic consequences. And I, for one, am glad they took the action that they did on the basis of the best information they had.
I know that. Let's take a look at what the President said at the time when he was building the case for war to the American people, how he sized up the need to go to war, because it very much varies, I believe, with what the Vice President's now saying, that we didn't have to believe that there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq to go to war against them. We simply had to believe they might produce them. Here's the President making his case to us, the American people, back in 2002.
America must not ignore the threat gathering against us. Facing clear evidence of peril, we cannot wait for the final proof, the smoking gun that could come in the form of a mushroom cloud.
And here's Dick Cheney laying it in clearly right before we went to war in March of 2003, saying that we're facing a country that actually possesses nuclear weapons.
We know he's been absolutely devoted to trying to acquire nuclear weapons, and we believe he has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons.
He has, in fact, reconstituted nuclear weapons. He has nuclear weapons. That's a charge made by the Vice President. We're facing a country that possesses nuclear weapons. We got to go to get them, stop them. David Corn.
It wasn't true. And the Iraq survey report that Frank just referred to was put together by Charles Dulfer, who was a kind of a hawkish fellow picked by the Bush administration, said after coming back after the invasion, after being in Iraq, that the WMD program of Iraq had progressively decayed, and I'm quoting here, and they found no evidence of, quote, concerted efforts to restart the program. At the time of the invasion, Saddam Hussein might have wanted to have weapons of mass destruction someday down the road, but he had no program at the time, and his capacity to produce nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction had deteriorated to almost to the extent that it was basically nil. Now compare that with what you just heard Cheney say. In August of 2002, Dick Cheney got out and said, without doubt, Saddam Hussein is amassing stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction to use against us. All that was false. As you noted, we had an inspection program that was very robust, that was ongoing in the months prior to the war, partly put in place because George Bush had threatened to go to war if there weren't inspections. But the inspections were working, and they were finding the right answer. The answer being that there was no pressing, dire WMD threat at the time as it had been depicted by President Bush and Vice President Cheney.
That's the point that I wonder about, having lived through it and argued with it for you and all those months going to war. We went through a long period where there was a fight to get inspectors in there. We got the UN behind us on that. Senator Clinton and other Democrats supported that inspections regime. The whole idea was to go in there and see if they had any of these weapons. That progressed for a bit, and then the president said that's not good enough. We want to see a proactive program like the South African whites engaged in, where they brought out the weapons proactively and burnt them in front of us so we knew they were destroying them. They couldn't just lay back and wait for us to find them in kind of a cat-and-mouse game. We went through all that under the premise that we were trying to find out if a country had weapons of mass destruction. Now the vice president says yesterday to ABC, it didn't matter whether they had stockpiles of weapons of mass destruction. We were going to go to war anyway. And my question to you, is there any way Saddam Hussein could have stopped that war once we issued that ultimatum to present the weapons? Was there any way he could have ended that war, prevented it?
Well, Chris, the conclusion of the last war we had with Saddam Hussein was supposed to involve making a clean breast of all of their capabilities and completely eliminating them. It absolutely was not incumbent upon us to catch them out. It was incumbent upon him to demonstrate that he had in fact gone out of the business. And I think David is conflating a bit the chemical program, the biological program, the nuclear program. Just let me finish this point, if I may.
But why
there's
the
a
long
conflation here, though, Chris.
If they didn't matter?
If
they didn't matter, why did we have inspections?
There's a conflation here between the chemical, the biological, and the nuclear. Where it matters, I believe, is that you had in the chemical and biological program the capacity to kill thousands of Americans. Had that plan that I just mentioned that was in the Iraq Survey Group that Charles Dolfer led been carried out, which was, I believe, imminent had we seen the sanctions lifted. And that's what the president was contending with, a situation that was not static, but one that was moving inexorably in the direction of allowing this guy, Saddam Hussein, to get access to all kinds of technology, to use not just the oil for food funds to scam everybody, but actually to tap into the mother lode that his oil revenues would enable to rebuild whatever he wanted to, possibly nuclear, but certainly some of these other weapons of mass destruction programs.